good to go.
Mhm.
Let me just do a quick check here. Make sure everything's all right with the stream.
Mhm.
Looking good. Stream is good. All right. Alexander, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. I mean, this has been an extraordinary week. Lots going on, which we will no doubt want to cover. But it's been also extremely exciting to follow all of this, and it's very exciting to be actually interfacing with our viewers and speaking to them directly and getting their questions directly. I mean, that's going to be very exciting. But we've had an extraordinary week, so I'm feeling great and looking forward to our program.
All right, great. Nene, welcome to the Duran community. Good to have you here. Valius, thank you for your $20 super chat. As always, Valius, I hope you are doing very, very well. And you're ready for the big election night on election day and night on Tuesday. Tuesday's the 3rd?
Tuesday's the 3rd, absolutely.
Tuesday's the 3rd.
But of course, we may not actually have a final result then. I mean, this is what's so strange. I mean, I've never known that before in the US, but there we go.
Yes, there was an earthquake, tsunami earthquake in Greece and Turkey. Absolutely. And in the Aegean, actually. Thank you very much for asking. I believe right now I think we have 2 fatalities in Greece, and I believe it's 8 in Turkey. Yeah. I'm not sure of the latest update for that, but all our best to everyone that was hit by that tsunami or that earthquake in Greece and in Turkey, and we wish them safety and all the best. Absolutely. And we didn't feel it here in Athens. At least I didn't feel it, to be honest. I read about it, but I didn't feel anything here in the city center. So let's wait just another minute or two, Alexander, as people come in. Let's see where people are joining us from, actually. Spartan Warrior Queen, our awesome moderator, the best in the biz. How you doing, Spartan Warrior Queen? Guys, hit that like. If you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel. If you want to wait and see how this live stream goes before you subscribe, wait and see, and I'm sure at the end of the live stream you will subscribe. Of course, as I said, hit that like. Also, check us out on Discord. You'll find our Discord server in the description box down below. And of course, you have the Duran shop and Patriotic Legacy and the Patriot Beacon, Duran 20% discount. When you go to the Patriotic Legacy and pick up the Beacon, they're running a contest. You get a Duran t-shirt, you get a Beacon 3, the black color that Alexander has, not that exact one, but one that is like that one. And what else, Alexander? What else? PayPal, Patreon, subscribe, star. Yes, our prayers for Greece and Turkey. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Aspedia, how are you doing, Panayotis? Let's see where people are joining us from. I'm in California. Sherry, how are you doing in California? How are things in CA? Let's see. Midlands, UK. Limerick, Ireland. From London. Alexandra in Maryland. In Arkansas. Berkshire. Tucker Carlson, 2024. That would be something. I'd vote for that. All right. Kenosha, Wisconsin. Hey, Courtney, how are you? How are you doing? Let's see. Parler is a good platform. Nigel, absolutely look for us on Parler. We have a real active profile on Parler. Actually, Parler is very, very active. It's an interesting platform. It's got a lot of activity. Check it out. Look for us there. Danny, our other super moderator. How are you doing, Danny? Danny takes care of all the Discord stuff. And man, the Discord server is blowing up. I mean, just a lot of good conversations. A lot of good stuff there on our Discord. Check it out in the description box down below. You'll find the link for that. From Calgary, Alberta, lockdown Wales. Yes, non-essential items Wales is what I'll call it, because they have a lot of strange non-essentials. Someone said that the reason they make the books non-essential, Alexander, is because they in the stores at least, because they say people flip through the pages. Do you find truth to that?
I wouldn't surprise me, but I think the most likely explanation is that they don't want people reading is the problem. answer. I mean, it's as simple as
Why?
that. There's a famous quote from a Chinese philosopher which said that a wise ruler empties the people's fills the people's bellies and empties their minds. So they're not filling the bellies, but at least they can empty the minds. So no books. That seems to be the most logical explanation to me. Seriously, I mean, it's such a weird and eccentric and bizarre decision. I really can't understand it. And I mean, the idea that people will just flick around, pages in bookshops is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just, if that is the answer, it just shows how irrational this whole thing has become.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just what I read from someone. Yeah. Hello from Algeria. How is everyone in Algeria? Let's see. Wisconsin, important state, Wisconsin, very important. I'm calling it for Trump, but let's hope and pray. Let's see. Manchester, New Mexico. Let's see where else. Another Wisconsin, Texas. Jonathan, how are you in Texas? Liverpool, England, Tier 3 lockdown, Liverpool, England,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. A Tier 3 indeed. And can I just say, a wonderful and great city. It's had its hard times. It's had its good times. It's a city of tremendous culture. It's very, very dramatic to see it. And, it's sad to see it, facing this kind of pressure.
All right, guys, let's get started. We have a good close to 500 people here. Glenn Greenwald, Alexander. Did you read the article that he was supposed to put on the Intercept, but his editors, from what I understand, said no because he was critical of Hunter, and it must be very painful to walk away from the publication that you founded, that you're a founder of. I can't imagine that would have been an easy decision. But to be quite honest, from my standpoint, with every passing year that I would read The Intercept, the more it kind of sank into neocon, neoliberal, narratives. I mean, that was the impression that I got with each passing year. The first year it went out, it was very cutting edge, very cool. But with each passing year, it became more mainstream establishment. So, Alexander, what did you make of Glenn Greenwald's stance, what he said in his article, the position he took, and what do you think about what his editors did? Because they came out with a kind of rebuttal, which was devoid of class, I would say. Instead of, thanking Glenn for everything he's done, they took pot shots at him, which I thought was very just not a good look.
No, I thought it was absolutely awful. And I mean, saying that they regret the passing of the great journalist as he once was, or some kind of words like that, implying that he's not a great journalist anymore. I thought that was outrageous, actually. And I think, can I just say, I mean, the only reason I've ever really gone to The Intercept ever was because Glenn Greenwald was writing on that. I mean, I thought that his column was always interesting. Sometimes, he covered topics that I was less interested in, but sometimes he was absolutely astonishing. And for them to write like that about him, I thought was just horrible. And I don't know whether you've read the email exchanges between him and the editors before he left, but they are really ugly, because he came up with this article, which, by the way, I have read. I mean, I should say he's purposefully published it without, the final edit. So there's actually quite a lot of typos and things towards the end. But it's a typical Glenn Greenwald article. It's massive, very long, even by my standards, it's very long. It's very comprehensive. It goes into extraordinary detail. It's very balanced. I mean, you can see always his legal training and the way he's extremely careful always to source what he says and to balance things and to accept possibilities that specify what the ambiguities are. Sometimes I think, I'll be straightforward about it, I think he overdoes it. I think he gives too many hostages to the other side, if I can put it like that. But anyway, it was a typical article by Glenn Greenwald, very, very fine. It didn't say anything, any single thing that was factually wrong about this great scandal that we've all been hearing about, and we've got to be so careful even now to mention and discuss, involving Biden, who is standing to become president of the United States. So there was nothing there that was factually wrong. You have the editors coming back saying, we want you to be, because there's all, you don't take into proper account the fact that, there's some uncertainties about this and some uncertainties about that. And he writes, as the lawyer he once was, this extremely effective rebuttal, pointing out, exactly where he does all the things that, they say he should do. And then at the end of it, they don't respond to that. They simply say, well, you're obviously not prepared to cooperate with the editing process, and so we're not going to publish the article at all. What they wanted to do, they didn't want him to edit. They didn't want to edit the article. They wanted to trash the article. They didn't want him writing about these sort of topics at all. That was what came across very obviously when you read that email exchange. Now, he set up the Intercept. I remember when it was set up. He set up the Intercept so that it would not be like that it would be a different publication, a strong, courageous publication that would publish those things freely and openly and courageously, which the establishment media felt constrained about doing. And here we see that the Intercept was trying to stop him publishing in the middle, just before an election, a critically important story about the election itself, which was, as I said, they make no factual criticisms of it, none whatsoever. And of course, apparently, not just in breach of the principles which the Intercept was founded to promote, but also apparently in breach of his contract with them, which, given that he's a lawyer, I would have thought was extremely risky, because, I'm not saying that, Greenwald is a litigious man. Probably he's not. But I mean, that does seem to me to be taking certain risks. But, I see no reason from now on to read the Intercept, because it's exactly what you said. It's just become an entirely commonplace, boring, DNC type, centrist, it's not even centrist, I mean, conformist magazine. I could just as well go to Vox or Mother Jones or, all of those, and it would be exactly the same, only actually most of them have a little bit more vigor and vitality to them. The only thing that made the Intercept different and interesting was Greenwald. So, I mean, not only was it a total betrayal of their founding principles and an extraordinarily brutal treatment, I mean, bullying treatment of their lead journalist, but as a business decision, it was a disastrous one, because I am sure that an awful lot of other people, left and right and centrist probably too, think exactly like me. Do you really want to part with the person around whom the Intercept was, to some extent created, who created it, who founded it, who sold it, and who wrote far and away the most interesting articles for it? So, I mean, a fascinating article, good article, didn't break any new ground as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there was nothing there in his article which I didn't already know, but, fair enough. He sets it out, as I said, in a very comprehensive and clear way. And at the same time, appalling treatment of him by his editors, who are clearly trying to stop him writing this article. A brave decision on his part, a difficult decision on his part, a sign of the extent to which we now have this suppression of this story happening at every level now, and ultimately a betrayal of the Intercept's purpose and a catastrophically bad business decision.
Yeah, a huge business, a terrible business decision, a huge business decision on Greenwald's part, terrible business decision on the Intercept's part. My prediction is that they're kaput.
Absolutely.
Without Greenwald, it's
who would bother?
They're just not that interesting anymore.
Well, exactly. Why not go to Vox or Mother Jones or even BuzzFeed? God help us. I mean, you'll find all the same stuff there. You probably find it better written and more interesting too. I mean, it's not even a real left-wing journal. Like, there's some. I don't want to embarrass them by giving their names, but there's some really great left-wing journals out there. This isn't even that. Without Greenwald, frankly, it's nothing. It's just boring. I mean, and for them to trash him in that way, when he was actually trying to be polite to some of the people who were still there, I thought that was really, really bad, actually.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I bet that this has been brewing for a while. I would be surprised if this was the first article that the editors decided not to publish or they wanted to water down. I doubt that this was, a one-time thing. Then Greenwald said, "See you later." So I bet you this has been brewing for a while. I bet you everything that we're saying about how the Intercept has changed and has become, for the most part, just another mainstream media rag. I bet you that Greenwald felt it too. I'm positive that Greenwald saw it and felt it. So
if you read his various pieces, I mean, he's all over. He's been on Twitter. He's been on Tucker Carlson also, by the way. He's been on, which they don't like. They really hate the fact that he goes on Tucker Carlson. That's one of the other things. But he's actually said this. Now, apparently, he says, I don't know how much I really believe this, that he's been able, by and large, to publish what he wanted up to now, but it's not always been very easy. But one thing I would say is I have noticed that he's been writing an awful lot less recently. I mean, it's been interesting, actually, how at one time he was writing all the time, it seemed to me, and then gradually he seemed to be writing far less than he once was. So that was already a sign of stress. But what he also does say is that he himself, and he makes this very clear, was becoming very unhappy by the direction the Intercept was taking over a very long time. He criticizes himself for sticking with the internet for the Intercept for as long as he did, and he explains why he did that. And he also says that he was very unhappy with some of the Intercept stories, which were basically Russiagate stories, and was constantly coming to the editors and challenging them and saying, why are you publishing this rubbish? Because it is rubbish, it is unsourced, it is untrue, and was getting nowhere with them. So he was increasingly unhappy. And I think a lot of people noticed this. Certainly, as I said, I noticed the fact that he wasn't writing anywhere near as much as he once was.
All right. So the main point in all of this is that the big power centers in the United States and in the world, really, the mainstream media, big tech, the intel services, the oligarchs, the Soros-funded NGOs and the other NGOs, but let's say the Soros-funded NGOs, the Democrats, the DNC, all these power structures have colluded and have coordinated to completely suppress this Hunter story, completely suppress. There was a poll taken that said 51% of the American public, I forgot who the poll was from, but I think I was watching it on Fox News actually, but it did say that 51% of the American public, or maybe even Greenwald said it, really believe that the Hunter Gate, let's call it Hunter Gate, is Russian disinformation. I mean, they believe it's Russian disinformation, and they're not that concerned about it. They don't see it as factoring into their decision for the election, which is quite incredible when you think that there are actually people in the United States of America who have voted or will vote for a man who is obviously, with all the evidence, all the documents, all the audio, all the video, has one family member, a direct family member, completely compromised. I mean, from head to toe, compromised by, at the minimum, the Chinese, most likely the Russians as well, and God knows what other governments around the world. And you also have evidence, including an eyewitness who corroborates everything on the laptop, and we're getting signals that we have more witnesses and more information coming out that he was in the know at a minimum was in the know about everything that was happening with his son, and most likely was benefiting from all of this, acting as some sort of godfather-like figure to collect the money because it was his name that everyone was leveraging. Now, you have that aspect, but you have the flip side. All the suppression, Alexander, that they've been doing and has been successful. You do have people like Greenwald, who I believe by resigning from the Intercept has actually brought more attention to the Hunter story than his article would have done, even though it might have been a great article and read by many people. His resignation brings more attention to it. You also have people like Joe Rogan, who has a massive platform, if not the biggest platform, where he's also coming out and saying, this is complete BS. And I'm paraphrasing. He had Alex Jones on and he said, it's complete BS what big tech and the mainstream media is doing by suppressing this story. He wasn't there to take sides, but for him, it was complete BS that this information doesn't get out so that the American people can at least know what's going on and can make the decision based on the information that's out there. So, you can call it the Streisand effect, but Greenwald, by his resignation, may have actually a bigger impact on getting this story out than that actual article that he wrote up.
Absolutely, indisputably. I mean, that's the problem with Greenwald's articles, is that they're wonderful to read for someone like me. I love reading his articles, but they are very long. They're very closely argued. They're very technical. They're very legalistic. By the way, people say that about some of my articles, but he does that much more. Very, very few people are going to know about or going to go to the Intercept to read those articles realistically. Some people will, obviously, and as I said, he attracts some traffic to the Intercept because of that. But most people know Greenwald because he's a media personality. Far more people are now going to know about the fact that he's resigned and the circumstances of his resignation than would ever have read his article. So that's the absurdity of this. And by the way, that opinion poll, I don't believe it. I'm as skeptical about that opinion poll, about people think it's Russian disinformation, as I am about all the others. On the subject of being Russian disinformation, the Director of National Intelligence, Mr. Radcliffe, has denied it. The FBI has denied it. The Senate Intelligence Committee has denied it too. They've gone through Boblinsky's papers. They say they are genuine and authentic. So who do you believe? Do you believe the DNI, the FBI, the Senate Intelligence Committee, or do you believe 50 retired intelligence officers? And this is, by the way, a big issue for Greenwald. 50 retired intelligence officers, Clapper, Michael Hayden, Jim Comey, all that crowd. Do you believe them when they say it has all the hallmarks of Russian intelligence, of Russian disinformation, but we don't even know that it is? And besides, they don't actually use the word disinformation. They say that it might be a Russian intelligence campaign. And they even admit that the emails and documents and photographs and all the rest are authentic. So I don't believe that poll, and I don't believe that anybody should fall for that absurd argument. It's exactly what you said. I think by trying to suppress this story, they're making a lot of people very worried and very uneasy about the direction the United States is taking and about the state of its democracy. And at the same time, by this resignation of Greenwald's, far more people know about this than would have done if the Intercept had just published his article and left it at that. Because the Greenwald's resignation is a big story. His article realistically would not have been.
Yeah, his article is a great article, and I think it clarifies a lot of points that that everyone has been made as they've been reporting this story. The people that have decided to report on this story, like us, but I mean, it puts everything in very proper order, and he argues some very good points that
very
I think needed to be argued.
Very elegantly in his very structured way. But, you know, hundreds of thousands of people would have read his article. Millions of people know that he's resigned. That's the difference.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think it's, once again, I go back to the overall collusion and the suppression of this story. And I think about the big tech CEOs in the Senate for the Section 230 hearing. And, you know, there was some nice theatrics. It was interesting watching Ted Cruz go after Jack Dorsey. It was interesting just listening and hearing Jack Dorsey, just actually seeing him there, and or watching, you know, Mark Zuckerberg's transformation into becoming an android and a robot, and just watching him speak and seeing, you know, human being turning into a robot figure. But, you know, that the Senate could have asked such better questions of these guys who have suppressed this article than they did. And one of the most obvious questions they could have asked is, how are all of you guys working together to suppress this story? Are you calling each other? Are you texting each other? Do you just know? What's going on here? Because it's not just Twitter, you know, blocks a tweet. 1 minute later, after Twitter does it, then Facebook does it. Then Google, you know, removes us from search. Then YouTube purges videos. I mean, these guys act in complete unison. It's not only big tech. I don't want to pick only on big tech. It's mainstream media and CNN and MSNBC who've reported nothing on this. And then it goes to New York Times and Washington Post. Okay, we all get the picture. But you had big tech right there. You had him right there. And not one senator sat there and said, guys, are you colluding? Are you colluding together to suppress news? Not one of you, all of you guys.
Absolutely. I mean, I take exactly that view. I mean, I've sat in hundreds of court hearings. This was just a huge missed opportunity. No real advocacy at all, in my opinion. No proper cross-examination. No really searching questions. I mean, Ted Cruz got a lot of publicity because obviously he prepared this comment about who elected you. And that's fair enough. But I mean, everything else he said, I thought Dorsey just batted it away. And the reason he was able to do that is because these were the softest of softballs. That was my own feeling. I mean, a real attorney, a really good trial attorney, I mean, would have, you know, a Clarence Darrow would have just demolished them. I mean, he would have taken them apart. He would have been sarcastic. He would have been ironic. He would have asked them questions they'd have had difficulty answering. He would have reminded them repeatedly that they were on oath and that there were consequences for not telling the truth. He would have said that he didn't believe what they were saying. He would have asked them things in a completely different way. And he would certainly have brought up the topic of collusion, which you referred to, and not just collusion with each other, but clearly collusion with other people. I mean, one obvious question, for example, to ask of Jack Dorsey would have been, did you speak to anyone in the DNC? I mean,
we know they work. We know they work between each other.
Well, exactly. So, did you ever speak with anybody in the DNC? Did anybody in Twitter speak with anybody in the DNC? You know, if not, are you prepared to provide all your telephone logs? Because I will say straight away, I don't believe you. That's the kind of questioning that would have put them under real pressure, not this kind of very soft back.
They know this, though, Alexander. They know this. They just don't want to ask it because they're also in the tank. Even, I'll say it, I enjoyed Ted Cruz's, once again, his exchange, but they're all in the tank. Left, right, Republican, Democrat, they're all in the tank with big tech. That's my take on it.
I didn't enjoy Ted Cruz. I was frustrated by Ted Cruz, but then I've seen real advocacy and real cross-examination, and I know how it's done. I mean, I should make it very clear, I was never good at it. I've never done it particularly well, but I've seen how it can be done well. And this is pathetic. It was rubbish, frankly. And I'm talking now not about the general. I mean, all the others were just all over the place. But I mean, Ted Cruz specifically. I mean, you could have asked far more devastating and difficult questions of those people, reminding them always that they were on oath, giving the impression, as good advocates do, that you know an awful lot more than the witnesses do, and giving the impression. Sometimes, if people know that you're a good advocate, you get information. But asking information about, kind of things that went on within Twitter, nobody asked about that. Nobody asked Dorsey, whom did you consult within Twitter about this? What kind of meetings did you have? When did you meet them? Did you keep records? Can you provide us with those records? Can you show us where this policy is? When did you inform people of this policy? Did you discuss this matter with the security services? Did you speak to the FBI? Did you speak to the newspapers? Did you contact the New York Times? Did you contact the Washington Post? Who did you speak to in all of these places? All right, not much time in these kind of hearings, but the Republicans could have agreed between each other that they would have one person who would ask those questions, and perhaps they could even have instructed a trial attorney to do it. It was a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion.
Deliberately missed.
Absolutely.
How come they didn't get Dorsey? Let's just pick on Dorsey for now. How come they didn't get him on perjury?
Well,
at one point, Ted Cruz, and I didn't understand this line of questioning, but Ted Cruz, I understood it, but I didn't understand it because he's sitting there going to Dorsey and saying Trump's taxes. You spread those around Twitter, and Dorsey's like, yeah, but those weren't original, something along the lines of those weren't original sources. But then Ted Cruz says, no, those were original sources, and it's a felony to distribute someone's taxes, original source material of someone's taxes. It's a felony. He said, it's a felony. How come they didn't do something to Twitter or the execs there? They did much worse to Flynn. They did much worse to Roger Stone. For God's sakes, they had 15 FBI agents storm Roger Stone's house in the morning for much, much less.
Absolutely.
But for these guys, nothing.
Nothing. Zero. Absolutely zero. I absolutely agree. I mean, talking about perjury, there was one instance when Dorsey said, not I think in response to Ted Cruz, but to another person, something was flat out untrue, that they've never censored Donald Trump's tweets. They have. We know they have. Dorsey must know they have. So you say to Mr. Dorsey, can you please repeat that? Is that what you actually said? That, the Twitter has never censored Donald Trump's tweets? And then he would presumably say it or not say it. And then you say, Mr. Dorsey, are you aware that Twitter has in fact, well, actually you wouldn't do that. You'd say, what is the structure of decision-making in Twitter? Would you know about, I mean, when you say they've never censored Mr. Trump's tweets, do you follow what Twitter does in terms of the tweets of the President of the United States? Well, he'd have to say yes. And then, as I said, you lead up to the question and you say, well, Mr. Dorsey, you must know then that Twitter has in fact censored the tweets of the President of the United States. And then he would have to admit that. So when you said that they don't censor Twitter, what you said was not true. And he would have to say yes. And then you say, well, Mr. Dorsey, are you aware that you are answering questions before this committee on oath and that it's perjury not to answer truthfully? And then he would say what he wanted to say. And then you would say to him, well, why in that case did you lie when you gave us your previous answer? That's how cross-examination is done. I want to stress again, I was never good at it, but that's how it's done.
Yeah, these guys are not scared because they're doing all this stuff via Zoom, and none of them had any legal representation next to them. If this was serious, this was such theater. This was such a joke, and it was such theater, and it's just so insulting to watch this stuff. It's like watching a reality TV show. If this was serious stuff, I mean, if these guys were really scared and this was serious, in my opinion, each one of them would have had 2 lawyers sitting to each side of them as they were answering these questions. All of those guys, God knows they can afford an army of lawyers. They can afford 100 lawyers, but they would have had, each CEO would have had two of the best lawyers, one on the left, one on the right, even if it was via Zoom, and they would have been answering these questions. For God's sakes, Jack Dorsey looked like he was sitting on his freaking balcony and he just got up from an all-night bender. That's what he looked like. That's how much of a crap he gave. Literally, he didn't care. He didn't care at all that he's talking to the Senate about this stuff. Didn't give a crap. If this was the real deal, these guys would have been lawyered up and they would have been ready, and they wouldn't have just rolled out of bed, opened up their MacBook, and just turned on the Zoom and said, okay, yes, Senator Cruz, yes, okay, we did that. No, we didn't do that. Okay, are we done now so I can go back and continue smoking my joint? I mean, literally, that was Dorsey.
Well, exactly. I completely agree. I mean, he wasn't taking it seriously. None of the others were. I mean, none of the others were, in my opinion. And I mean, they didn't look like they were. And they were right, because they weren't, as I said, put under any real pressure. All right, Cruz got his nice statement about who elected you. But I mean, that was an easy one to come up with. Anybody could have done it. Real questioning of these people in a way that, you know, actually obtains information. We didn't see it.
It's all theater, Alexander. And let's move on to another story, which is also theater, but it's connected to all of this. And it has to do with the FBI. The FBI has had this laptop for 1 year now. They have said nothing. They've done nothing. Now they're throwing out the excuse. Okay, I can get behind it. Let's say that they don't want to interfere in the election like they did in 2016, even though that wasn't interference. I think James Comey was trying to find a way to cover for Hillary as best as he could. But that's just my take on it. But in this instance, they said, you know what? We didn't want to say anything because we don't want to look like we're interfering in the election, even though at that time, President Trump was undergoing an impeachment over a stupid telephone transcript that we had right in front of us and we all could read. They had this laptop. They had all the information on it. They said nothing. They did nothing. Now we know, as of yesterday, we know that they were, and they may still be, investigating a money laundering operation with whose name involved? With Hunter's. Yes. A money laundering operation with Hunter. Yes. This guy, Hunter, my God, this guy was getting money from Moscow, ex-Moscow mayors' wives, billionaires. He was wiring money to girls in the U.S. who were sending it back to some trafficking ring in Eastern Europe. He was making money for Burisma. He was the personal attorney to this Chairman Yi guy for a $9 billion deal to buy a 14% stake in Rosneft. He was his personal attorney. This is Hunter Biden. Give me a freaking break. Meanwhile, while he's running around doing all this work, he's videotaping himself, smoking you-know-what, doing you-know-what with God knows who. Well, I'll leave it there for that part.
Well, first of all, I mean, this business about interfering the election. A year ago, when the impeachment was underway, Joe Biden was not the candidate, the Democratic Party's candidate for the presidency. He only became the Democratic Party's candidate for the presidency at the convention a few months ago. That is the point at which the Hatch Act, which says that you don't interfere in an election, comes into play. Hunter Biden is not a candidate for the presidency. You do not stop or remain silent about an investigation of someone when you have overwhelming evidence against them simply because they happen to be a politician's son. That doesn't make any kind of sense. The FBI, moreover, given the seriousness of these allegations, should have informed both the Democrats, the DNC, and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden that this investigation was underway, and advised them that in all the circumstances, it might not be a wise thing, I'm using the words very carefully, for Joe Biden to stand for the presidency, because if he did, that might interfere in a ongoing and very serious criminal investigation. So there is no defense for what the FBI did. That is
Alexander,
a completely pathetic argument.
If I can cut into you there, are you telling me that you don't think the FBI tipped off Nancy Pelosi to the fact that they had this laptop a year ago?
Oh, I'm sure they did, but I mean, not just tip off. I mean, give serious formal warnings, which would have been logged with the Justice Department, and would have been, well known. They might even have been made public. I mean, it seems to me that this is that kind of a matter.
That's the part that I have a real hard time understanding. I can't imagine the FBI had possession of this laptop a year ago, before we even knew that Biden was going to be the front runner, and he was going to win the Democratic candidacy. Mm. I cannot believe for a second that Pelosi and Biden and Obama and all the entire Democrat power structure was not informed by the FBI that they have this laptop, which would mean they knew everything that might have been coming their way.
Oh, indeed. In which case, also, they would have known that the FBI wasn't going to bring proceedings or pursue these investigations in any vigorous fashion, because if they'd thought otherwise, they wouldn't have proceeded with the impeachment, and they wouldn't have gone ahead to nominate Biden. I mean, that's the only possible conclusion one can come to. I mean, bear in mind, when the FBI said that, they didn't want to interfere with the election, non-disclosure of this kind of information is itself a form of interference. Certainly, it was an interference during the impeachment proceedings, when disclosure of this information about the Bidens would have been highly relevant to the Senate when it decided this question. So, and that was long before the election got underway.
The only thing I can think of in that case is that they didn't suspect that the computer repair guy had a copy. They thought that they grabbed the laptop and that's that. So they said, no problem, FBI, just bury it. And the FBI said, absolutely, no problem. And that was it. Or they thought, we'll suppress this story no matter what. We'll just drag this on and suppress it until we get Joe over the finish line on November 3rd. Because in their mind, he's going to become president. Nancy Pelosi said it yesterday. No matter what the vote count is, she said it, no matter what the vote count, Joe Biden will be president of the United States. Once again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what she said. So in my mind, they just thought, you know what? The FBI, Nancy Pelosi sitting there with all the DNC power structure. Even Joe might even be there, even though he probably wouldn't know he was there. But she might have said, you know what? We have this laptop, Joe. It's got all this stuff about you and your son, and it's got everything. And even Kamala Harris and some other people. I mean, there's stuff about other Democrat higher ups there as well. There's emails and stuff like that. There's all this stuff. We're just going to carry you over the finish line, and then we're just gonna ditch you.
Well, I mean, these are entirely plausible deductions. We don't quite know, because we don't know what went on behind the scenes. We don't know what kind of discussions they had. But can I just say, I am absolutely sure that everybody important enough to know these sort of things in Washington has long known about the kind of things the Bidens have been up to. I mean, it's not as if Burisma, for example, wasn't something that had been circulating around. And I'm pretty sure they knew about the laptop too. I'm sure the Bidens knew about the laptop. As you say, they probably didn't know that the computer repairman in Delaware had kept a copy of the hard drive. Probably they didn't know that, because bear in mind, the FBI turned up with a warrant to seize it, which had been provided to them by a grand jury. They had a grand jury subpoena for it. So they actually went there to take it. They didn't just come to receive it. They were going to actually physically take it and take it away. My own personal view is that if it had not been for the Delaware repairman computer repairman, the probable answer is we would never have known about this laptop. That's my own theory. It would have existed. It would have been known about. And, you know, if Joe had wanted to do things which some people were not too keen on, well, they would have come along and said to him in his ear, well, you know, Joe, we've got some photographs. There's this laptop that's with the FBI. Do you really want to pursue these policies that we're not happy with? That's, I think, much more likely what the whole scenario was.
Unless they knew about the laptop, but they didn't let Joe Biden in on it. I mean, the Democrats knew about it, at least the top upper echelon Democrats, and they just didn't let Joe in on it, knowing that one of two things: if Joe loses, then you know it's perfect for them because they have you know someone to sacrifice to the crowds as an example of corruption. In other words, because a lot of this stuff touches it could touch other people as well. In other words, it's getting very hot for a lot of people at the DNC, very hot because of this laptop. So it's best to just give up Joe Biden if you have to. So if he loses, you can give him up and you remove a lot of heat from yourself. You know, here he is, guys, take him, tear him apart. And, you know, the other people that are kind of involved in all this stuff can rest easy. If he wins, then you have the ultimate leverage on him and you can just, you know, toss him aside and move Kamala right into power.
Absolutely. I mean, bear in mind, this has happened before. I mean, there have been stories about J. Edgar Hoover having information about politicians in the United States and his files and using them to gain leverage. I doubt it was anything on this scale. But, you know, there's supposedly precedent for it. Anyway, I'm sure that's my own view. I think this was probably what it was there for. It was an insurance policy in case, you know, it would have been used as an insurance policy in case Joe strayed too far away from, you know, whatever planned script they have for him. And, you know, if they needed to use it, they could have used it.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, just to quickly add, James Comey used the Steele dossier, the discredited Steele dossier, in a way that Donald Trump thought was intended to blackmail him. And that is confirmed. So this kind of thing happens in Washington.
The hoax Steele dossier that originated from
a
Russian girl living in Cyprus who was chatting with her boyfriend in Perm.
Absolutely. That hoax dossier. But, you know, sometimes you can fabricate evidence against people and it can still scare them. At this occasion, it didn't scare Donald Trump, and all the evidence we got was that the FBI were utterly shocked and dismayed when, instead of being intimidated, Trump came back all guns blazing in response to what Comey had done. But the fact is, he interpreted it as an attempt to blackmail him on completely fabricated material. But that's how he saw it, and we know that he's told people about that.
All right, guys, subscribe to the channel, hit that like. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen, for everything you're doing. Thank you, Danny James, for everything that you are doing. And Alexander, let's shift gears and travel to France and talk a little bit Macron. Is Macron now, is he a nation status now? Is he a sovereigntist? Has he turned his back on his globalist integrationist agenda? What's going on with Macron? What's up with him?
I mean, he's under intense pressure. I mean, that's the first thing to say. I mean, he's caught between the secularists in France, who are a very powerful tradition in France, the laïcité. Many of them are, you know, very left wing. I mean, you know, le canard enchaîné is, you know, very much the toast of the left. And that's the people that, you know, Macron appeals to. And remember, most of those people, in terms of the European Union, are integrationists. And of course, at the same time, he's got the lobby, the Muslim population in France, which has been invited into France. Well, not invited into France, which have been allowed to come into France. And of course, some of these Chechens who are in France and who were, in fact, you know, if not invited, given asylum there. So you know, France opened its doors to these people. So he's now caught between these two blocks, and at the same time, he's under a great deal of pressure because the economy in France is doing very badly, and the pandemic has taken hold there, and he's been pushed into lockdowns and all sorts of things. So he's in problems. He's having very, very, very great problems. But let's also remember that so is France, and it's now facing a real problems with internal terrorism, which is a real issue, and its relations with a lot of Muslim countries are very bad, and the economy is in a bad way, and Macron himself gives no sign of being in full control.
Yeah. I mean, from what I understand from going back in history, this problem that now Macron, I think, it's been thrown his way, but he's also dug himself quite a hole for various reasons. France was warned, not him, but France was warned about during the Russia-Chechen conflict. France was warned about many of the Chechens that were fighting in that conflict, not to give them the visas that they did give them. I mean, when you dig down to the roots of many of these problems, that is probably the beginning of the problem that Macron finds himself in with regard to this. Now, the way he handled it, the PR optics were he bungled the whole thing. I mean, there's just no other way to describe the PR aspect of it. And a lot of nations came down hard on him, and probably rightly so. It's hard. I can't really see how he's going to get out of this one. And I'm sure that Merkel is kind of sitting in a corner giggling. I'm sure that she's kind of enjoying watching Macron figure out how to punch his way out of this one. But what do you think about what I just said?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I can remember Britain doing exactly the same thing in the 1980s with all sorts of people who were coming from Afghanistan and Pakistan at that time, and they were being allowed to come to Britain, and they were allowed to set up mosques there, and they were allowed to set up, well, what they called educational institutions, and well, that all turned out very, very badly, and the British found that they had a tiger by their tail. And France, amazingly, made exactly the same mistake. It had all these people from Chechnya. Remember, in the 2000s, in the noughties, Chechnya was a very big focal issue for the people who were very critical of Russia, who are always very critical of Russia. It was a sort of a cause for them, if you like, and they were completely oblivious to the reality of the sort of people they were backing. Even though, as you absolutely rightly say, the Russian authorities repeatedly warned them. They didn't just warn them, they actually came to the French and asked the French to extradite some of these people and return them to Russia. And the French always refused. And so did the British, by the way.
Yeah, so I mean, Russia warned them.
Absolutely, of course it did. I mean, and Russia, and they of course had to fight them in the Caucasus, and they knew exactly the kind of people they were. All I will say is, if you really want to study the conflict of the Caucasus in the noughties, in the 90s and the 1990s and in the noughties, you will find, if you go to the proper sources, people like Gordon Hahn, who have written about this, they make it absolutely clear that this very rapidly morphed into a very, very violent jihadi movement in the Caucasus, which was extremely dangerous. And there were a lot of people of that nature there. The Russians were very concerned about it. They were telling the French, they were telling the British, be very careful, don't take in these people. And of course, the French ignored them, and the British ignored them, and the United States, to some extent, ignored them too.
Wasn't Macron also that today this week he was kind of going at Chechnya and Kadyrov and saying, you're at fault, or you should take many of these people back. And Kadyrov, I think rightly so, was like, you were look, man, you were warned, and Chechnya is a much different place today than it was, back then. I mean, I hear the place is actually quite amazing today. The way it's been it's been built up.
Absolutely, it's completely stabilized, and people who've been there, I mean, I've never been there, but people who tell me who've been there, it's a very stable and peaceful and very prosperous country. And Grozny, the capital, has been completely rebuilt, and in a monumental way. So I mean, it's quite a completely different place from the kind of place that it was. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, Kadyrov gets constantly criticized and told about what people say, you know, what a bad person he is. But he's pointed out many times how very dangerous these people that the Western politicians like Macron have, those people that they've sided with, how dangerous those people are. And Kadyrov has simply not been listened to. On the contrary, he gets criticized all the time. The real reason for all of this is that, be straightforward about this, so there was an awful lot of people in the West in the 1990s and 2000s who wanted to see Russia in real trouble in the Caucasus. They were looking forward to further breakup of Russia, just as the Soviet Union had broken up. They wanted to see a major defeat for Russia in the Caucasus. They were very, very angry when that didn't happen. And they looked the other way at the sort of people they were backing.
All right. So how does Macron get out of all of this? Because, like you said, on the flip side, he also has this this lockdown that he's trying to put in place. I mean, I don't know if you saw photos of it, but people in Paris are just trying to get out. I mean, massive traffic jams. People are out on the streets. Everyone is just, you know, ditching the city. Very much like kind of, I guess, what's happened to New York in a way. But this one is everybody at once, because everyone just feels what's going to be coming, which is this massive lockdown. So on top of all of this stuff that Macron has, you know, been thrust into and in many ways put onto himself, he now has this lockdown that he's trying to put in place. All they have, Alexander, all the EU leaders, is the same hammer, the same nails. Lockdown, more masks. I mean, cases go up, more masks. Lockdowns. Cases go down, less masks, less lockdowns. Cases go up, more lockdowns, more masks. That's all they have. That's it.
That's all they have, exactly. Well, you know, there comes a point. There comes the point of no return when it's not really possible to say what someone should do, because whatever they do, it isn't really going to make any difference. And I wonder whether France and Macron aren't coming very rapidly now to that precise point. I mean, bear in mind, he's been unpopular in France for a long time. He has an active and imaginative foreign policy in some ways, but his domestic policy has been all over the place, and he's never really been, you know, pursued policies that French people can relate to. We've discussed this so often on so many programs with the Yellow Vests. He always came across as being ultimately somehow against France. He was for Europe, but against France, which, if you know France, it just isn't going to ever be accepted by the great majority of French people, because the French are a deeply patriotic people, very proud of their history, very proud of their culture, and they have every right to be. So he has that problem, and that perception has crystallized, and at the same time, he's lost control. He doesn't have an answer to the pandemic issue. He just doesn't. I mean, he doesn't know what to do. You're quite right. He goes from one to the other. He doesn't have any kind of other exit strategy. He doesn't really have a good economic strategy. And at the same time, he's now finding that this immigration policy that France has followed for a very, very long time, not just immigration, but, acceptance of ideas in France, which perhaps other French leaders of former times, people like General de Gaulle, might not have approved of. I am sorry, I have to be careful again in my choice of words, because obviously there are people concerned about what we say, but I think our viewers understand. But, he's found that all of these different things are irreconcilable with each other, and he doesn't have a clear way out. all he can really do, I think, is hold on and hope for the best and hope that things somehow turn out well for him. What I predict he's going to do, by the way, is he's going to turn up to Berlin and ask the Germans to give him more money. And he's going to push very hard for more integration within the EU, because that's the only answer he ever has ultimately to anything. I don't think the Germans are in a very, very listening mood for that sort of thing anymore. And of course, as a policy, it's not a policy that will make things better. It's a policy that will make things worse.
Yeah, how does that help, number one? And
it doesn't.
How can Germany help in this situation? Germany has its own problems right now. Germany is also having protests. People are also protesting in Germany as they're protesting in Poland, as they're protesting in the UK. People were out on the streets. Italy, people are protesting in Milan and Naples. I mean, the whole thing is just coming completely undone.
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly right. But I mean, of course, the Germans can't help. I mean, the Germans can't go on right. The Germans can't write blank checks. I mean, that's impossible, especially given the amounts of money that are involved now. So, I mean, that isn't a realistic option. But I predict that is what Macron will do. I mean, one of the signs of a political system and of a political elite that it's losing control is not just when they are no longer able to come up with the answers to the questions. It's when they don't even understand the questions. You know, they have a complete inability to conceptualize and understand the problem they are facing. Now, I have no doubt what they should do. They should, as you correctly said, pursue sovereign policies, sovereigntize their policies. But of course, their ideology makes that impossible. So if it makes the obvious solution an impossible one, what else can you do? What else can you do but do what Macron always does and says, you know, more Europe. More Europe is the answer to everything. More Europe is the answer to the yellow vests. More Europe is the answer to the unemployment. More Europe is the answer to the pandemic. More Europe is the answer to the banking crisis. More Europe is the answer to the unemployment crisis. More Europe is the answer to, you know, these cultural problems that are besetting us. Well, of course, the true answer is that more Europe is only going to make all that worse, because it is the ultimate cause of these problems. It's not the solution.
I want to get to Corbyn real quick and what happened there, because I think that's a huge story. But before we get there, I want to ask you, you know, more Europe. I think that you said Europe is moving in lockstep. I agree. Pretty soon, every country will have the same policy. Yeah. I think some countries may be a week or 2 weeks off the other, but they're all moving in the same direction. And the direction is real simple: more lockdowns, more masks. It's a sliding scale. That's all they know. They don't know anything else. No. Lockdown, mask. Lockdown, mask.
Well, not indefinite lockdown. It seems now, because because bear in mind, I mean, you know, the structures that were supposed to be put in place in the spring and summer during the lockdowns to control the problem, which would come in the winter, have either not been put in place or have failed. So, given that is so, what justification do you have for actually ending lockdowns? You're trapped in a situation, in effect, of indefinite lockdowns if you take that approach.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's no creativity there. There's no thinking as to what's
Well, but it's a collapse of government. You don't have it anymore.
Yeah, you don't have it anymore. But and all of Europe is moving in unison to just an overall pan-European type of lockdown, and you know, wear masks at all time. Even if you're home and you're asleep, they're going to force you to wear a mask. That's where they're heading with all of this. But contrast that to the U.S., and you have an election coming up on Tuesday. We've said many times, you've said many times, that the U.S. economy will get out of this. Yes. You said many times that Trump, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but you said that Trump is leading the U.S. out of this. Yes. All signs point to that fact, that
Yes.
You can bash Trump all you want. People can bash him all they want if he, notified the people, or if he didn't notify the public about the deadliness of this thing, or what he told Woodward, whatever the arguments are that everyone says. Closing travel to China, not closing, xenophobic, not xenophobic. We've all heard the Democrat talking points. But the fact of the matter is that on a whole, Trump has done a good job managing this thing for the United States. And I think the numbers bear that out. There were some people, a lot of people that were saying, you guys are wrong. It's, the U.S. is not going to bounce back. Trump won't be able to manage this thing. He's going to fail. Things are falling apart. I don't think that's the case. But I do think, Alexander, come November 3rd, God help us, if Biden gets into the White House, he will copy exactly what the Europeans are doing and what I would say the Canadians are doing, or what the Australians did. In other words, you're going to have that neoliberal rat pack not working in unison on a pan-European level, but on a global level. And we're going to be looking at a complete lockdown everywhere. It's going to be back to the Obama days, but times 100, where all these guys, all these world leaders are working together to come up with the same exact policy decisions for their citizens. And in the case of the U.S., a Biden White House will mean just a blanket lockdown. That's my opinion. That's how I think it'll unfold.
You're absolutely right. I mean, look, compare the figures. There's far more cases in Europe, far more fatalities in Europe than there are in the United States. And in Q3, the third quarter, the US economy came surging back. It was the fastest growth it's ever had in its history. There is nothing like that in Europe. So what does Biden propose to do? He proposes to copy what the Europeans are doing. I mean, that which failed in Europe is what he is proposing for the United States. Now, the United States, if you look at the figures again, I know some people, some of our viewers, don't approve of testing and don't approve of tracing, but that was always said to be what one should do. The figures for the US on that are off the scale. No European country comes close to matching them. Not Europe in aggregate comes close to matching them. The US has been far better organized at a federal level to deal with this problem than Europe has ever been. And if you're talking about the individual sort of state level, well, the worst places where things really got disastrously out of control have been run by Democrats. It's a fact.
Yeah, no doubt. Can you comment on the growth in the U.S. Real quick, Alexander? The argument is that okay, there was a 33.1% growth, but of course you had a 34% contraction, or 36% overall contraction. So you're still 4% in the hole. But even 4% compared to where Europe is, or where the rest of the world is a massive difference. Even Germany is not. I believe Germany is just a touch under 10.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely. I mean, can I just say, I mean, right at the very beginning, when we were first discussing what would happen with this pandemic, we predicted that Europe would be an absolute mess. It would be 10% contraction there. It's looking worse than that, actually. I mean, I think in the case of Britain, it'll be a lot worse than a 10% contraction. And I suspect that will be true of Europe as a whole. And of course, a second lockdown is going to turn it into spiraling disaster. And bear in mind that in Southern Europe, they're already crippled by debts, which they can't repay. And locking down the economies there is going to drive their economies into an even worse tailspin. So Europe is in a total mess, and the United States is surging. Now, 4% contraction this year. But of course, if the US economy continues to recover, at some point early next year, all the losses, I'm talking about statistical losses. I accept that many people have suffered, many businesses have closed. I'm not talking about, obviously, there are lots of individuals who've gone through a very tough time, but we're talking about economies. And overall, at some point early next year, if the policies continue as they are now, all those losses all those statistical losses will have been regained, and you can start rebuilding all those businesses and all those things which have been lost. In Europe, we've had all those losses at an individual level, only they've been far worse than in the United States, and the macroeconomic picture is far bleaker. So we have indefinite lockdowns, indefinite contraction, exploding debt levels in Southern Europe, massive deficits. Everything is going wrong.
How do you explain the argument about the stimulus packages and the money printing? For example, why would the U.S. be better off, even though they've given massive aid packages already? They've got another stimulus package, which Pelosi is holding up, but that'll come through as well. And then you have the Europeans who, for example, the UK has given some stimulus packages. The EU had their Hamilton moment, and the ECB, where they said, okay, we're going to earmark $1 trillion, and in 2022 or 23, it'll come about. But why will the US, maybe on a short to medium term, be able to also get over the sheer size of the money printing better than Europe or the rest of the world?
Because it has a real currency. Europe doesn't have a currency. The euro isn't a real currency. It's not a real monetary system. It's a sort of note. It's a unit of exchange, but you can't use it in the same way as the dollar can be used in the United States, and that's a fundamental difference. Europe cannot pursue the kind of monetary policies that the United States does. Now, can I just say, in the long term, I think the United States cannot continue printing money in the way that it is doing. I mean, and has been doing for a long time. And by the way, that really got underway under Barack Obama. That was when it began to get completely out of control. It had already been problems building up. Then under Obama, it got far, far worse. But even allowing for that, the United States has a proper monetary system and a proper currency system. Europe doesn't have anything like that. Its banks are in a mess. Its currency, as I said, is a completely artificial one. And its policies, the ECB's policies, are completely not fit for purpose. It cannot be otherwise. It cannot be otherwise. Because for a proper currency, you need a proper country with a proper treasury and a proper banking system, which you can only have at a sovereign level.
All right. So we shift gears now to the UK very quickly. Alexander, Corbyn has been suspended.
Yes, absolutely. I think that was. I'm going to say something. I mean, I've read this massive report into the anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party. First of all, there were clearly problems. There was anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Secondly, there were clearly major process issues which had to be resolved and weren't resolved, and of course, an awful lot of people deep distress. Even allowing for all of that, I think Starmer's decision to suspend Corbyn was a mistake. Because instead of moving forward and dealing with these issues and putting them behind him and treating Corbyn as, yesterday's man and yesterday's move that, we're moving past, by suspending him, he looks politically vindictive, and it's opened up a civil war within the Labour Party. And I, am very familiar with Labour Party policy, and I can say for a fact that there are all sorts of people now who are saying, whether rightly or wrongly, that Starmer is using this issue for factional reasons, because he wants to purge the Corbynites, wants to consolidate power. And whether or not that's true, what it is doing is it's starting a whole round of new conflicts and civil wars within the Labour Party. That's my own view about this. Certainly move forward, deal with the problem that is. Picking on Corbyn in that way, I think, was a mistake.
Starmer is like a Blair 2.0. And, the world is, God, Tuesday is such an important day, because if Trump doesn't get in, I'm looking at all the leaders now that are in place. the world is moving towards a very, very dark time. I mean, extremely dark time. I'm seeing people like Stalmer. You know, you have Trudeau has held power in Canada. God, I don't know how he's still there. You know, you have Macron, who's, God, I mean, he's in all kinds of trouble. But you know, that worries me even more. Merkel's still hanging around.
Yeah.
You know, if Biden gets in, we're in a world of hurt. We're going to have a lot of war and a lot of big problems.
I'm glad you made those comparisons, because that's exactly what we're looking at. I mean, Starmer, Macron, Trudeau, Biden, and Merkel all have well, they have many things in common, but one thing they all have in common is that they are weak leaders who try to compensate by appearing strong. So, you know, Starmer thought that by suspending Corbyn, that would make him look strong. A really strong leader, dare I say it, Donald Trump, would have said, well, you know, Corbyn's yesterday's problem. I don't really need to worry about him. I can just move on and deal with this. Starmer doesn't have that confidence. Weak people never do. So they end up acting in ways that are intended to make them look strong, but actually, in the end, antagonize people and expose their own weakness. Macron, by the way, is an extreme example of this. He always goes for very authoritarian solutions. And of course, all that does is it doesn't make him look strong. It exposes, again, the fact that he is ultimately weak.
Yeah, he's a very poor version of Tony Blair, because Tony Blair was damn sinister, but he was
he's a much more supple politician than Macron was, and indeed, dare I say it, definitely than Starmer is. I mean, Starmer wants to be Blair, but he isn't Blair. That's a fundamental difference. I mean, I say that, and I make it very clear. I mean, I abhor Blair and everything he stood for, but that he had political skills, that's indisputable. But a really strong leader fights battles that he or she has to fight, and you know, doesn't waste time with things, with battles that are simply irrelevant. This question of suspending Corbyn was irrelevant. I mean, Corbyn put out a statement. Maybe it wasn't the best worded statement. I don't know. I mean, I read it. I didn't think it was that bad myself. I'm at a complete loss to see what rule what Labour Party rule Corbyn is supposed to have broken. Nobody would have paid any attention to what Corbyn said. Suspending him has now made it this big issue. And I've been getting all these, seeing all these messages all over the place from all these left-wing activists within the Labour Party who are now rallying and saying, we've got to defend Jeremy. So what good has that done? So instead of, giving the country the impression that you're leading strongly and firmly your own party, and you're going to be dealing with, this problem of anti-Semitism and the completely dysfunctional bureaucracy that your party has, what you've got yourself instead is a civil war. I don't really see what the benefit of that is. Even if you win that war, which Starmer probably will in the end, because he's got the parliamentary party and the bureaucracy behind him, it will come at a cost. His activists will be upset with him, and the public at large will say to themselves, well, this is a leader who is at war with his own party.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's and I really wish that progressives in the US and real liberals, not the fake liberals, but real liberals in the US, traditional liberals, would take a look at what Starmer is doing. To me, it is exactly what's going to happen in the US as well with the Biden, Kamala Harris White House, in that these guys, they're just the neoliberals and the neocons. They're just getting started to just wipe all the opposition out of there. They're going to get rid of the progressives. The neocons are going to get rid of the traditional conservatives. They'll get rid of the libertarians. They'll get rid of the traditional liberals. That is exactly what's being prepared. That's what's being prepared in the Labour Party. That's what's being prepared in other countries around the world. That's what a Biden-Harris White House will do as well. So all the people in the U.S., all the progressives, real progressives, not fake progressives, and all the traditional liberals that sit there and they're voting for Biden, you guys are being completely and utterly played, because what's happening in the Labor Party right now is exactly what's going to happen to you guys. The minute you get these neoliberal clowns in a position of power, they are going to just wipe you out. And they'll wipe you out in very brutal, disgusting ways. They don't care. They're going to consolidate their power. This stuff scares the hell out of me, because if a Biden wins, I'm telling you, if a Biden wins, the machine has reconfigured itself. It's stronger than ever now. It's neocons, neoliberals, it's big tech, it's oligarchs, it's intel services, it's Hollywoods, it's professional athletes, it's all of them. It's reconfigured, it's stronger than ever, and they're just going to put a beat down on all of us. Conservatives, libertarians, progressives, you name it, they're going to wipe us off the map.
You're absolutely right. But can I just say, the machine you're talking about is immeasurably more powerful and immeasurably more dangerous in the United States than it is in Britain. I mean, this is a factional dispute in the Labour Party. The Labour Party, as we've seen, has a highly authoritarian faction. I mean, they're now, trying to sort of carry out purges, and they're doing it in a completely incompetent way. The kind of people we're talking about in the United States, not Joe Biden. I mean, Joe Biden is just, he's just a face, basically. But the people behind him are far more sinister, and they would do exactly what you said. I'm sorry, my dog is getting excited, but all right. Yeah, he doesn't like Starmer either, or Biden.
Smart dog. All right, let's say your dog is signaling to get some super chats. What do you say?
I think he is. I think that's exactly what he's saying. He says we've been talking too much.
All right. Let's get to some super chats from Les Alagnat, 55 NOK. How is the lockdown linked to the Great Reset?
Well, this idea is that if you lock everybody down, then you're in a much stronger position to reorder economies and societies in ways that suit you. And I think there are people who think like that. I mean, you listen to some of them, Bill Gates and co. Not just Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates is just a name, one of them. But I mean, lots of people and people further down. There are some people who generally think like that. I have always taken the view, personally, that it's more a case of lack of imagination and lack of understanding of what to do than, as I said, real masters of the universe controlling this. But, that doesn't mean that such people don't exist and they aren't seizing these opportunities also. I mean, they will, they can do it. They can, plant us with their apps. They can try and reconfigure the way our societies work, our economies work, our culture operates. Much easier to do that if we're all locked up in our homes than if we're, going about living our normal lives. So I think that's what that's all about.
All right, from Mark, a £5 super chat. Hello, gents. Republicans already leading in Miami-Dade, Florida, the most Democratic area of Florida. Very good news.
Well, it is, yeah.
It's very good news, actually. Yeah, I think Florida is going to be a big win for Trump.
Well, can I just say, obviously we haven't seen the results yet, but I made a prediction way back early in the summer. That wasn't me; it was the two of us. I can actually remember the discussion in which we said that you're going to see Hispanic and Black voters voting in much larger numbers for Republicans, and I'm sure that's going to happen. I think Trump is going to draw them in, and in places like Florida, I think you will see that also. So good result, yes. Mm-hmm.
From Toilet Sauce, a €10 super chat. Color Revolution preparations. Step 1, send few or no observers to target country. Step 2, doubt the result. Hint: Moldova holds elections this Sunday, and OSCE sends a limited number of observers.
Absolutely. And can I just say, if you go to the Russian media, there's lots of talk about this, that, they failed in Belarus. They did fail in Belarus. I mean, the thing there seems to be completely winding down now. There was an attempt to organize a general strike this week, and it completely failed. But having failed in Belarus, they're now going to try in Moldova. And Moldova is a much more divided society than Belarus. It's much more like Ukraine used to be than Belarus is. So it's entirely possible we will see a crisis in Belarus, in Moldova before very long, in which case we will cover it.
All right. From Sparky, a $5 super chat. Senate just had tech CEOs on just for show for the election. They have no intention of doing anything about tech cartels, trusts, or monopolies.
I completely agree. The only way you're going to see anything done about that is if Donald Trump is re-elected and the Justice Department, under strong and purposeful leadership, starts to pursue relentlessly its antitrust actions. The antitrust action is launched against Google is a start, but there needs to be done an awful lot more.
All right. From Sparky, nothing changes until we see the elite perp walks.
Mm-hmm.
Until we see elite perp walks.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Sparky from Craig Ferguson, a £5 super chat from Sparky. Dorsey came back to Twitter as a figurehead and as a buffer between Twitter and the House and Senate. He's not involved in Twitter's day-to-day operations.
Well, I'm sure that's true. But again, a good cross-examination would have brought that out. And then the question is, well, Mr. Dorsey, if you don't make these decisions, then who does?
They're a public company.
I know, but who does? Who gives us? I know, but if that's who does, and what are you doing? Why are you there? Why do you claim to be its CEO if you're not able to make these decisions yourself? I mean, what I'm saying, the point I'm making, and we were making before, is that whatever the truth about Twitter, that cross-examination was a farce. It was exactly that. It was show. And it was not, it was a huge missed opportunity. And whatever the truth about Twitter, having Dorsey there, you could have taken big steps towards exposing it.
Look, I mean, if there's one thing that I've criticized Trump on, it's that he didn't go after big tech.
Yeah.
That's if there's one thing I've been critical of Trump. Yeah. But I'll also say this, our only chance to get some sort of resolution and some sort of reform in big tech and some sort of protection of freedom of speech is Trump, because it's obvious that the Senate, whether Republicans win the House and the Senate, whether the Democrats win both, whether it's a split, it's clear as day that they're not going to do anything. So our only hope there is also Trump.
I agree. I mean, absolutely. I mean, well, first of all, Biden is not going to do anything. There's no conceivable way that he's going to take on Dorsey and Zuckerberg and all those people. I mean, there's no way that's going to happen. Trump is the only possibility. I think he now understands the big mistake he made, which was not to take them on before. I think he's now understood that his failure to take them on has made this election far more difficult for him than it otherwise would have been. Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt about that, actually.
I agree with that. All right. From Falve Pollard, a $50 super chat. Hello from Cape Cod. Love you guys. Thank you very much for that super chat. Very generous super chat. Thank you very much. From Sparky, tech makes government J. Edgar Hoover times a billion.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what J. Edgar Hoover was up to in the 50s and 60s is, as we say in Britain, small potatoes compared to what these guys get up to. I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, this is on an entirely different scale. And they know it. I mean, I come back to this expression, over mighty subjects, which we used to use in Britain, especially in the Middle Ages. Barons who were more powerful than the king. That's exactly what they are. These people think that they're more powerful than the federal government. They can censor the president, they can control the information, they can steer elections to the outcomes they want. They are a danger to the democracy of the United States.
All right, from RJ, a $5 super chat. Thank you, RJ. From Life of Brian, a $5 super chat. At this point, it's more appropriate to insult prostitutes by calling them journalists. Thank you.
Well, there's that famous quote by Stanley Baldwin, British Prime Minister in the 1930s, who once said, that the media is, seeks power without responsibility, the prerogative of the harlot. So that's what he actually said. I have to say, I think that's unfair to many journalists. Many journalists historically have been very serious and very, very decent people who work very hard to expose the truth. But my goodness, are things bad now?
Yeah. From Joe S., can the FCC revoke broadcasting licenses for mainstream media channels on the basis of fraud and deception to the American public?
This, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the regulatory system is in the United States. It's never happened. I'm sure that, unless there is a major political change, however tough the regulatory system is, it simply isn't going to happen. And they don't believe it's going to happen. I mean, none of the big broadcasters think it's going to happen, which is why they pump out the things they do.
All right. From Toilet Sauce, update on the MH17 trial.
Well, that has been grinding on, as far as I understand, in the Netherlands, attracting very, very, very little attention. I don't know very much about it, actually, because there isn't very much information. All I can say is this: it is based entirely, as far as I can see, on radio intercepts. And I have heard from a scientist, somebody who knows about these things, who's gone over those radio intercepts, and he tells me that he thinks these are very unreliable. And apparently it has been admitted that some of the radio intercepts that were originally released were doctored. So doesn't look as if the evidence is very strong. Doesn't seem as if this case is getting an awful lot of attention.
All right, from JHW, Lockstep, has Alex been reading Rockefeller? No, I haven't actually.
No, I haven't actually, but maybe I should.
All right. From Toilet Sauce, Putin says Erdogan must take part in peace talks regarding Nagorno-Karabakh. Is he out of his mind? Why give Erdogan the influence he has been playing for?
That wasn't my understanding of it. They had another conversation the other day, which is a very, very angry one, at least according to the Kremlin readout. I mean, you have to read these Kremlin readouts very carefully. But apparently he again went after Erdogan and said to Erdogan, there's all these jihadi fighters been coming to the Caucasus, and this is a very, very serious issue. So it is Erdogan who's constantly coming to Putin, not the other way around. And I think the Russians will certainly resist that. By the way, speaking of that, also lots of news about a Russian bombing offensive in Idlib going on. And I read a very interesting piece in the Financial Times by David Gardner, who is a very strong anti-Putin journalist, who was saying that, this is Putin now, starting to put the squeeze on Erdogan, with the Turks being forced to pull their forces back from Idlib, with some of their posts, their military posts there being surrounded and then being pushed back. So apparently Idlib province is very close to collapse at the moment. So I don't think we were going to see Erdogan involved in the negotiations in Turkey, in the Caucasus. The Iranians, by the way, at the moment are now making a diplomatic initiative about which we know virtually nothing. So we'll see.
All right. From Sparky, colds lead to deadly pneumonia, often in the elderly and vulnerable. 15% of colds are CV, but if CV is called a cold, people wouldn't panic. The world wouldn't shut down for a cold.
I'm not able to discuss the science of this thing. All I will say is that, what I will say is what we've said before: the political response to this disaster has been terrible. I mean, they've taken this situation and they made a catastrophe out of it. They are destroying Europe. Yeah.
All right. From Shakaraj69 and A599, will Peter be joining you again in the live? Not in the near future. From JJHW, watch the lobby on Al Jazeera to see how Israel frames adversaries like Corbyn. Israeli interference in UK politics is a huge problem.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about this in Britain. This is a British issue. But what I'm going to say is that's one issue. The major issue at the moment is the fact that it is absolutely clear, and everybody in the Labour Party, including Corbyn, admits this, that the party's internal procedures for dealing with these kind of problems completely broke down. And that I don't think is disputed. That is what this report that we've been hearing about is essentially about. And a wise and clever and strong leader would have taken that, perhaps criticized Corbyn, his predecessor, for not sorting it out and worked to put it right. Instead, as I said, by suspending Corbyn, he's made this all look like a factional battle.
All right, from Sparky, CV is a replacement virus, not an additional one. Aside from people murdered by Cuomo and his like, the same people would have died from the previous version of CV.
I'm afraid, again, these are scientific questions that I have to give a pass on. I simply don't know.
Cuomo did make a track, regardless of the science. Cuomo did hand. I mean, they give him a lot of praise, but
I don't understand why. I don't understand why they give him any praise at all. New York's response was a disaster, and de Blasio also. I mean, apparently the two men dislike each other, but I mean, they're each as bad. I mean, one shouldn't laugh because it's a horrific thing, but the response in New York was calamitous, and frankly, they should be far more heavily criticized for it. I mean, it's amazing to me that New York City still votes Democrat, given how badly handled the situation was there.
It's incredible how they paint Cuomo as a hero for what he did to New York.
Well, absolutely.
A Sanchez 999. Are we sadly stuck with this corruption due to modern tech? They block truth and keep millions uninformed.
Well, corruption is an interesting thing. It festers, it grows, it gets out of control when a political system starts to become, fossilized. And this isn't a new thing. It's happened many times before history. I mean, before in history, I was quite recently, oddly enough, reading of all things, the book of Nahum, which is in the Bible. And it talks about Nineveh there and about how it was, a bloody city full of lies and robbery. Well, Washington, D.C., some people may see is a bit like that now. What then happens is that this becomes too much, and either the people of the country put a stop to it or it breaks down. And I hope and believe that in the United States, despite all these technologies and all these systems that exist, Mishkin is barking to tell me he agrees, that the American people will, in this election, put a stop to it. Technology is a tool. It's not in itself a power. People can always resist technologies as they've resisted corruption and force previously in history.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that, Alexander. The part that worries me is what if they use this technology to say, for example, if you don't, you have to download this app, and if you don't have this app, you won't be able, for now, to travel. But in 6 months, it may be like if you don't have this app and show a negative test result, you won't be able to go into the supermarket. You won't be able to open up a bank account. Yes. I mean, we've seen, we did a program which will go up this weekend, and I asked you a question with regards to the curfews that a lot of people are probably living through, or people, if you were in Melbourne, in Victoria region, you definitely lived through it. And I asked you, was it a form of martial law? And you kind of paused for a second. You did like a pause, and you were like, huh? And you thought about it just for like a quick second. And I asked you that again: is this a type of martial law? What we're seeing when a government says, you have to shut down. No one in the street, no one, not a car, not a person, nothing can go in the street from, 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Is that a form of martial law?
Well, the reason
from a legal perspective as well. I mean, it's an interesting,
The reason I probably paused is because, of course, from a legal perspective, martial law is when the military are put in some kind of control, because there is a military crisis. And this isn't a military crisis, but is the effect like martial law? The answer is it is. But you see, this is the difference. In a military crisis, you end it when the crisis, the military crisis, the war, if you like, is supposedly over. If this becomes indefinite, then it is ultimately incompatible with democracy. Can't keep people locked down and unable to lead their lives indefinitely, because then what you no longer have is democracy. Now, I don't believe that people are prepared to accept that indefinitely in Western societies, certainly not in the United States. So yes, they will try, I think, and impose things like apps on us, which people don't want. They will try and impose curfews on us, which people don't want. But sooner or later, when they do that, people protest, they come out, there are all kinds of problems, the problems escalate, and there is a loss of control. I said that was already happening to some extent in France, and that's only the beginning.
One more quick question from, I don't know if it's a legal perspective or a government perspective, but take, for example, Australia and Victoria. Would the police be defined as military? Is that a workaround for a government when you have large police forces enforcing, say, a curfew, a strict curfew like what we've seen?
No, I think it's a civil action because the police are not part of the military. But again, I come back to what I said. The effect is the same. If you are putting out, I mean, it becomes not a military, a martial law situation. It becomes a police state, which is in effect a kind of dictatorship.
Yeah. There's a reason you call it a police state. Exactly. From Sparky, death rates near zero for CV as shown in the US through widespread testing. Why worry about the number of cases if CV is rarely deadly? Might as well track and hype the common cold. I actually did see a chart that Laura Ingraham put up on her show the other day, which showed that while in the US, this was US specific, while the cases were rising in various areas, it did seem that even though there may have been little ticks here and there, the death cases were pretty much flattened and dropping, and that the treatments were definitely, at least there were signs that were showing whatever treatments were being administered at hospitals were improving dramatically. I mean, that's the chart that she showed, and it looked, it made sense.
I mean, I have to quickly say, I know people who have died as a result of this infection, but the fact that there is now improvements in treatment, I think that is indisputable. It is not as dangerous as it was in the spring. And I mean, I haven't known anybody who has died for a long time, well, for many, many months now, for several months now. So I think there's been a change. I definitely think there's been a change.
Yeah, she showed that it seemed that treatment was improving things dramatically.
Yes, and I think that change is going to continue. I think we will see more improvements all the time as science gets ever better understanding of how to treat this infection. That's my own view.
All right, from Ruby's 200, have you heard about Azerbaijan at Shusha's gates? Do you think Erdogan is taking advantage of Putin's Syria gambit, and does China play a role in this?
Yes, I mean, I have to say straight away that, as I understand this, the Armenians have contradicted this claim. What they say is that there was a reconnaissance force that went, which is possible, went there, and that it's been driven back. This is actually a fairly small region. But I come back, I have been looking at the map. It doesn't seem to me as if there's been much real progress on any side's part. One should not take many of these claims too seriously.
All right. Is Erdogan taking advantage of Putin's Syria gambit?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think what Erdogan is trying to do, well, I mean, right, if we're talking about Syrian gambit, I mean, has Erdogan used the fact that he has leverage over Putin in Syria, where the Russians obviously are trying to stabilize the situation? Oh, yes, he has. This has been a long-standing problem. But at the end of the day, and I come back to this, Putin is much the stronger player. And the Russians, as I said, have now been tightening, apparently, very considerably the pressure in Idlib. And I expect they will before very long in the Caucasus too. I mean, it reminds me a bit, as I said, all these stories about movements of forces remind me a lot of Ukraine. And in 2014, where the Ukrainians were making all kinds of claims of victories. And when you went to the map, you saw that they were really actually at a standstill. And it seems to me that this is pretty much the same here at the moment.
All right. And China? Is China involved in this at all?
No, I don't think China is actually involved. I think the Chinese are far away. They've got reasonably good relations with both Azerbaijan and Turkey and Armenia, and they will leave this to the Russians. One very interesting disclosure, by the way, was that Putin disclosed in an interview he gave this week that he talks to Xi Jinping practically every day. Think of that.
Interesting. Well, they have hinted at a military alliance. I don't know how realistic that is, but
what he said was, and this is again Putin, he said it was that this isn't an immediate prospect, but that he can imagine a situation in the future where it might happen. It's very, very qualified, and it was in response to a very leading question. So I don't think we're looking at an actual outright military alliance, but certainly the two are working very closely together.
All right. From Asavet MD, a $15 super chat. Thank you, Asavet MD. And another super chat from Asavet MD, $15 super chat. Thank you very much, Asavet MD. And from JHW, a £10 super chat. For the science of CV, see Dr. John Campbell, Dr. Bean, and MedCram channels. Vitamin D deficiency is a big factor in severe disease. Fauci is taking vitamin D supplements of 6,000 international units a day. That's a lot.
That is an awful lot,
6,000.
actually.
Wow.
6,000 off the scale, I'd say. But seriously, I mean, one should certainly take vitamins. I mean, I do.
Yeah. From I've always wondered why the governments don't give a voucher or something for people to get vitamins during this pandemic. I don't know. Well, something very logical to do.
Alex, it's too logical. It's too simple. That's why they're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean,
they want to do much more complicated and dramatic things like imposing lockdowns. For which, as we've discussed, there are various people who may have agendas in that direction also.
Yeah. All right. And the final super chat from Brando Commando. Saw a headline that Ukraine and Turkey signed a security agreement in which they will both back each other in direct and proxy conflicts. Thoughts? I have not seen that. Wow.
I don't think it's quite that strong, but Zelensky, who is the president of Ukraine, and Erdogan have met, and Erdogan took a very strong Ukrainian position on Crimea, and basically spoke of Ukraine very much as a sort of allied country. It's been covered a lot in the Russian media, and of course it has provoked a lot of anger, and Putin has been forced to answer questions about it and to defend his close relations with Erdogan in light of it. So I should say that there is a mounting pressure on Putin as well in Russia about his relations with Erdogan. Putin isn't the absolute ruler of Russia that people always say. He has to operate within a political system which is much more varied than people think. And there is now growing criticism of him about the closeness of his relationship with Turkey. I mean, he's still committed to it, but he's starting to pay a political price for it. And this business with Erdogan and Zelensky didn't go down well in Russia at all. And in Crimea especially, where I understand it went down extremely badly. By the way, there are people in Turkey, some people in Turkey, I'm not talking about the vast majority, I'm talking about some very fervid people who still consider that Crimea should be returned to Turkey. So I understand. And as for Ukraine, there were local elections in Ukraine, and Zelensky's party did extremely badly. There was a major fall in turnout there, but overall, the political situation in Ukraine looks bad. and the economic situation looks bad also. So one of the reasons, no doubt, he went to speak to Erdogan and enlisted Erdogan's support was that he needed the appearance, at least, of a strong friend in Erdogan too. So, you know, there are some rather interesting politics there. But it's a good question, and as I said, coming back to the point, Putin is paying now a political price for this thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been saying it for a while now. He's paying a heavy PR price, not only in Russia,
not only
in Russia as well.
Outside of Russia too, absolutely. And as I said, there is mounting criticism. I understand that there is mounting elite criticism of this also. I mean, both at popular level and at elite level, people are saying in Russia, you know, what is this? Why are we continuing to extend help to Erdogan in this way?
Yeah, he's paid a very big price for this.
Yes.
So we got one more super chat from John Cheeseman, $5. The police are really clamping down on Sack Andrews protesters here in Melbourne. They are writing big fines. See the Sack Andrews bus episode.
Well,
see the Sack Dan Andrews bus episode.
I've
Melbourne's been actually, I saw real quick. I saw some photos and videos that now that the restrictions have been eased a little bit, I mean, the people were just, I mean, they were so happy. It's like they've been in prison for 6 months. I mean,
yes. Well, yes,
they were partying, literally partying at the joy of just getting outside.
Well, of course they were. I mean, I know of one instance of a young woman who is a student. I think she's about 19, and she was forced to stay in one of these student rooms because, you know, she came into contact with somebody for something like 2 weeks, you know, confined to a single room in her hall of residence in London. And eventually she said, you know, when she was able to go out in the fresh air, it was just utterly liberating. So I'm not surprised. And
yeah,
I'm absolutely not surprised by what you've just said. And of course the police I've heard, well, anyway, I've heard very, very, very hard and troubling things coming out of Australia.
Well, we've seen videos of some of the things that have happened. They went through a brutal time. Hopefully they're out of it. Hopefully they're out of it. Yeah. All right. That's I think I got everything.
No. Well done.
All right, great. Is there anything else you want to discuss real quick, Alexander? Anything on your mind?
Well, of course, the one thing on my mind is the fact that we have an election on Tuesday. I will just say to all our American friends, vote please in this election. And this is the single most important election that the American Republic has had since the end of the Second World War. Unquestionably. Probably you have to go back to 1932 or 1860 or elections like that for elections as important as this one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Alexander. I think the whole world is hoping that America makes the right choice.
Absolutely.
Because if we get the other guy in office, I'm very, very worried for the world. Yeah. And that's from a geopolitical level.
Absolutely.
Geopolitical level.
There was a friend of us who sent us a rather interesting thing, which was, reasons for voting for Joe Biden. Yeah. And then you turned and then you said, actually, there aren't any.
Yeah, you clicked the link and it led you to a page which said there are none.
There are none. But actually, it's not like that. I mean, it's not that there are no reasons to vote for Joe Biden. There are any number of very important reasons why you should vote against him. As I said, I know people have issues. A lot of people have feelings about Donald Trump. Many of them may not be entirely positive. Many of them, in my opinion, many of the negative things that are said about him are completely groundless and unwarranted also, and are largely things caused by what people have said about him, as opposed to things he's ever said himself or done himself. But that's another story. Whatever your feelings about Donald Trump, the fact is, in my opinion, he stands for the Republic at the moment. Joe Biden and the forces behind him threaten the integrity of that republic. So that's why you should vote for Donald Trump and not Joe Biden in this election. And I've got my US magic mug to hand with my British tea, and I will end simply by showing that flag.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We'll end it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on this live stream, this Friday live stream. And we'll do a live stream probably the day after the election, Alexander.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Absolutely, I think we should. I mean, keep an eye on what's going on. The Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll do the Wednesday. So we'll keep on doing programs, guys, and we'll definitely be covering the election, and go out and vote. And you know how I feel about this issue and who I'm pulling for. And I hope that our man, Mr. Donald J. Trump,
pulls through,
wins in a big landslide. And I say a landslide because I think that's the one thing that'll prevent any other types of shenanigans or possible violence to proceed the Tuesday election.
I completely agree.
Yeah. All right, guys. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Take care. Thank you, Spartan Warrior Queen. Thank you, Danny. Thank you to everyone who sent us super chats and to all your questions and to the live stream. Thank you very, very much for supporting this channel. Discord server, BitChute and ODYSEE. Make sure to check us out on BitChute and ODYSEE as well. Take care, everybody.